Thank you for joining us for the second webinar in a two-part series on Israel and Palestine. If you missed the first session, which focused on the geopolitical dynamics, you can find it on our website. Today, we turn to the lived human realities in Israel and Palestine. This week's ceasefire offers a rare moment to pause, to acknowledge what we have endured, and to recognize those working every day to keep hope alive. Our panel of activists, peace builders, and humanitarian leaders will share reflections on their work and the ongoing efforts to strengthen resilience, dialogue, and reconciliation. And now, I'm excited to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, someone who is a remarkable activist in her own right and truly the perfect person to lead this conversation. Eva Armour has spent the past 25 years working with communities in conflict to imagine and build a more just and peaceful reality. She is currently the executive director of Seeds of Peace, where she has held multiple key roles over the past 18 years. For those who don't know, Seeds of Peace is a special organization that inspires and equips new generations of leaders to bridge divides and transform conflict through dialogue. Eva, thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Manny, and hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from. I just want to start by thanking Manny and the Institute for Middle East Options, who created this space and platform for us today, putting an important spotlight on the role that civil society can and does play in helping to reach and sustain peace. Thank you so much for that. And I want to thank all of you for choosing to spend this time with us. I can't think of a more important conversation for us to be having in this moment, as we are just days into a ceasefire agreement that feels both fragile, with violations and accusations already surfacing, and yet still full of possibility. If this can be successful, it will mark both an end to the worst of the violence and an opportunity for a real turning point. Our founder at Seeds of Peace, John Wallach, often used to say, treaties are negotiated by governments, but peace is made by people. He saw our work as helping to both create the conditions needed to reach agreements and the ties needed to sustain them. It's the difference between transactional peace on paper and transformational change that allows peace to actually take root and endure. And we have an incredible group with us here today that have spent their lives dedicated to the pursuit of peace, approaching this from many different angles. So I'm excited to introduce them to you. They have been doing the slow yet crucial, often unceremonious work that is fundamentally necessary and irreplaceable in order for a just peace to be realized. So guys, I'll ask you to come on screen with me here, and I'll briefly introduce you and we'll get started. Rabbi Nava Hefetz is an independent rabbi and a member of Les Guerriers de la Paix, or Warriors for Peace. Been working on my French pronunciation all morning, so hopefully I did okay there. She was most recently with Rabbis for Human Rights as the Director of Education and Interfaith there, and has run dozens of programs at the intersect of Judaism, human rights, and peace. She also collaborates with many Palestinian and Israeli civil society organizations and politicians in order to build peace and promote coexistence. We have Huda Abu Arkoub with us. She will be joining shortly. She's in transit. She's a Palestinian peace and policy strategist and feminist activist with deep expertise in conflict transformation, inclusive politics, and social change. Most recently, she was country director at Search for Common Ground in Palestine, where she promoted trust and collaboration in conflict zones. She was also the first regional director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace, which works with more than 170 Israeli and Palestinian peacebuilding groups. We've got Itai Flesher, who's the education director for the Kids for Peace Jerusalem program, which is part of our programming at Seeds of Peace, focused on interfaith dialogue with Israeli and Palestinian youth. He's also a journalist, so you can find his writing in many news publications. And earlier this year, he published his first book with HarperCollins, titled The Holy and Broken, A Cry for Israeli-Palestinian Peace from a Land That Must Be Shared, written in the time since October 7th. And finally, we've got Suleiman Khatib with us. He is co-founder and international director of Combatants for Peace, which is a grassroots movement of Israelis and Palestinians working together to end the occupation and bring peace, equality, and freedom to their homeland. He's also a co-founder of the Ripples Collective, a group of Palestinian and Israeli nonviolent activists, artists, and facilitators. At 14, Sully was sentenced to 15 years in prison and served just over 10 years, where he learned history, Hebrew, English, and studied world conflicts. He was inspired by peace activists such as Gandhi and Mandela and developed new ideas about the Palestinian and Israeli conflict as a result, and has been a committed advocate for the last 20 years. And hi, Huda, it's so great to see you. I want to spend most of our time focused on this moment that we are in, following this fragile ceasefire agreement and how civil society can play a critical role in these next steps. Before we get there, though, I want to begin with something more personal with all of you. I'll ask each of you to introduce yourself and your work. What first brought you into this work? What keeps you in this work, despite how challenging it can be? And also to share how you're arriving at this conversation today. What does this moment mean to you personally and the communities that you work with? And Nava, I think we'll start with you if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you well.
Okay, so I'm a liberal rabbi working for human rights and peace building for almost 40 years. I'm a lot in the West Bank, so I know exactly what's going on there. My motivation is from my Jewish tradition. And in my Jewish tradition, it is written that whoever saves one soul, it is as if he or she were saving the entire humanity. And whoever destroys one soul, it is as if he or she were destroying the entire humanity. So for me, each human being is important in this world and has a potential to become somebody, something in this world, can bring his own specificities in this world. I'm also a feminist, so for me the struggle is to see women in the table of negotiations. There cannot be democracy without equal rights to women, and women are part or can be part of the solution. Because we have a different way of thinking, we solve conflict every day, every night. I believe I came to this field when I was after the war in 73, when I said to myself, it's not possible that on the other side there's nobody to talk to negotiate with, to make peace with. And this is where my journey started, right after my the army. And since then, I've been in various organizations and associations. And right now, I decided to be an independent rabbi. I'm working with Les Guerriers de la Paix. I'm working with Standing Together. I'm working with whoever wants, with Combatants for Peace, where we demonstrate every week in Bejala. So I think it's time to stop talking and start acting.
Thanks, Rabbi. Huda, can I turn to you next? How are you arriving with us today, and a little bit just about who you are, the communities that you're working with?
Thank you, Eva. It's so great to be with such a group of wonderful human beings who are driven by their heart and beliefs for humanity, justice for all, and security for all. I am coming to this day, as always, with a lot of concern for our own safety and security. I am here coming to this day concerned about thousands of orphans in Gaza that I feel like they are, we should not sleep until we save them. I come here with the fact that there are so much talk about rebuilding the buildings, the streets, the institutions, but not rebuilding human beings after such a tragic trauma that will shape their future. I come here with the determination that I will not stop until we all recognize that we are all equal. And I'm not just saying that I am, the reason why I was late, I am on a train from Brussels to Paris, speaking to people who, have the ears of the leaders in this world to not let us alone and to not just think that a ceasefire agreement is actually a peace agreement. Unfortunately, we are ruled by dictators and clowns, and we need to slap them on the face and get them to do the right thing. What's wrong for an Israeli living in Tel Aviv is 10 times wrong to someone in Gaza. I don't know how are we going to change the minds of and the hearts of the Gazan children without being there, without giving them hugs, without providing for them, without taking their story to a different direction. So I am here with my concerns and my hope for a change, but also my determination not to stop until the last breath coming out of me.
Thank you, Huda. Thanks. Itai, can I turn to you? How are you today?
So I'll just say that for the past 2 years, probably the hardest question I've been asked is, how are you? It's a question that I continuously avoid answering. I'm guessing Huda, Suli, and Nava feel the same way. It's almost become this like taboo question in this part of the world. You don't ask how are you. You start conversations with, what have you done this week, or how are your kids, or things like that. But for the past week, I feel much lighter in answering that question, because as Huda absolutely said, the war is very much not over, but there's finally a ceasefire, and it just allows you to breathe again. In Jerusalem, a city that is, in my opinion, the most beautiful city in the world, and that is holy to Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and is also situated on a mountain, has beautiful mountain air. I feel like I'm living in the place that everyone's fighting over. Everyone wants this place to be theirs and this place to be their capital, and the symbols of this place to be the symbols, on their flags and their anthems. And doing dialogue work between Jewish, Christian, and Muslim children in this city, as I've been doing for the last 7 years, is a real privilege. And what I bring with me today is, I feel like I'm one of the few people that gets to experience peace in my day job. Like, I work in an office. Well, now we work from home, but I work with a group that is Israeli and Palestinian. We have a range of different political views. We have a range of different religious backgrounds. But in addition to our work, we have meals together. We celebrate each other's birthdays. We mourn, when our loved ones are ill. And I feel like I just want to show that what happens here on a very small scale can also happen on a much larger scale if we want it to be a reality.
Yeah, thanks, Itai. Suleiman.
Yeah, thank you, Eva, and really good to be with you, everyone here, like really good friends for many years, people that really inspired me. Yeah, so how I'm feeling. Yeah, I would say I had a mixed feeling about the ceasefire agreement. I wouldn't even call it like a peace agreement, honestly. I think this is just a step of like a ceasefire, which is good already. Obviously, I can see the positive side of it, which is relatively stop the killing. It's not really stopping fully, as I have to say also. to bring the West Bank as well, which is suffering from silent war, like already like for a couple of years, and not just the settler violence, but rather also the army, just to bring this to the light. And obviously, like many people, I guess, in the last years has been really tragic for a lot of us. And I would say I'm relatively, compared to other people, I'm typically optimistic person. So usually I'm the wrong person to ask how you're feeling. I'm usually optimistic, honestly. I feel grounded and connected with the reality. Um, yeah, you coming from like even the personal stories. I'm coming from organization that bring Palestinian Israelis together. Also, some of us has been part of the, armed struggle and violence. And maybe because of that specific like background, I myself was in that place as well and was in jail for more than 10 years. And I feel very connected when they spoke about the prisoners exchange, the people that stayed in jail still, and the people that went out of jail like after really torture and like not in a good like respect for human dignity, unfortunately. Like there are a lot of dehumanization happening in our area. And no one is really following neither the international law, neither the Abrahamic rules, let's say, since we all coming, like it I spoke about, how everybody want to take Jerusalem. And in my views, I love history. I studied a lot of history in jail. Yeah, Huda knows this. And basically what I know that this land that has never been belonged to one group. It doesn't exist like as a fact, like as a historical fact, by all narratives. And it's not gonna be in the future as well. So recognizing this fact, recognizing fact of there is no military solution. And that's where I'm coming from, like personally, and from the group, the community I work with, that some of us has fought and thought like seeking liberation and freedom through armed struggle, come to this conclusion if there is no military solution. And I think so many people are now recognizing that it's still true. And there is no zero-sum game. I be listening to some one Israeli influencer that actually is in the more in the right wing. I was surprised like a few days ago, and his after they signed the agreement, he was saying we have to recognize that both peoples are not gonna leave the land. It's a fact, whether people like it or not. I prefer to like it and to work with it as reality in order to transform it, to move towards a different reality that's not just really managing the conflict for the next round and so on. Like someone said, like peace is not the absence of violence, and this is what's happening right now. It's just the absence of the active violence. I think we want, from our experience, also that we practice daily in our with our inner work and outer work. We want to really achieve real peace and real coexistence, but that really requires system change.
Mm.
So for many people, maybe peace means there's no bombing anymore, no attacks. Obviously, that's blessing. I bless that. We don't want to see anybody that harmed. Of course, there is a long way ahead of us. Um, I'm optimistic because I also think that um, there is a bit of momentum globally. It's hard for me to bless and to like speak positively about leaders and the politicians, like Huda mentioned, but even if they're for their own interest and ego, I feel there is a bit of a global shift
Mm.
towards solving our cause. And I think that different groups that were coming from the different peace building and activist community we're coming from has showed us what we say always: there is another way, a different way, there is a different world that we wish to create. I think many of us work for that for decades already. And yeah, I remain really in this dream as well as something will happen in my eyes. And based on even the history, our people has lived together in the past for centuries and centuries. It's really important because we speak about trauma and um, generational trauma and the trauma that happened recently and the collective trauma. I think it's really important to address that as well, not just address the materialistic side of things. And this was missing in Oslo, I have to say, in Oslo agreement. This was not really addressed. So hopefully there is like a way that the decision makers supported by the civil society could be maybe learning from the past fuller experiences after Oslo and the other experiences in South Africa, in Ireland, and other places.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having
Thank-
us. I think this is the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And we're gonna dive into that a little bit more. And I'll just say everything you shared really mirrors how I have been feeling this week, even from far away. I feel like I am both breathing a sigh of relief and holding my breath at the same time, and just feeling really the tension of this. Huda, I know that you need to leave to be able to jump on another train. So I just want to bring you into this conversation quickly as we shift lens and start to look at the role of civil society. And I know you have the ears of policymakers right now. What can and should we be doing on our end? What is the role that civil society should be playing? What are you telling policymakers about how to invest in this work, holding that alongside all of the other priorities for investment around reconstruction and repair with families, et cetera? How should we be thinking about that?
Thank you, Eva, for the question. This morning I was in a room full of politicians and historians, and to them, the mere fact that Palestinians and Israelis can actually meet, even in such difficult times, is like unheard of. It's like they see it as, first of all, they don't believe it. Second of all, they doubt it. Third of all, they think it's exotic. And then they start talking about how theories, et cetera, et cetera. What we need to, from my own opinion, the only thing that saved the Palestinian identity and the society in general under different kinds of regimes and occupations is the civil society, the ability of the people to organize and provide for their needs, to hold their pain, to heal it and hold it, and to know how to survive after a tragedy. And I think this is what we need to promote more. It's not just about acknowledging the historic narratives and acknowledging the right to exist, all of that. It's how you do it, how you organize your community around a goal. And I think now more than ever, this is important because again, whether we like it or not, there are societies that claim that they are democratic. And if we keep talking to the leaders and so-called leaders and politicians, then we will lose the consciousness of the people themselves and we will let them be victims of manipulation. And I think this is the biggest task as civil society we have now, is how to talk to each other as equal human beings, look in each other's eyes and say this is wrong. And it's wrong for all who exists now, but it's equally wrong to the next generation. I think we need to up our game, not only to do, what is holy, which is demonstrating, making our voices heard, trying to do humanitarian aid. I think we need to literally hijack the policy and advocacy rooms. We need to be sitting on these tables. We need to make sure that they see us, hear us, and we need to have a plan. I am, in the past 2 years, this is what my effort was only focused on that, how to bring young women and men from Palestine and Israel to the policy, how to train them, mainly women, how to do policy recommendations, write policy papers, make sure that we are invited to every room and make the voices of the people who are not heard. And I think we have the talent to do that. This is part of our survivorhood mechanism and feeling responsible for our own people. That doesn't make us leaders who take the podium and speak. That makes us conscious leaders who our people will look at us and see that we are real, authentic, and we can hear them. And this is the kind of leader that I want the civil society to be, the community that brings all in one place, that does not discriminate, that does not stop when there is a checkpoint, that does use the pain in order to change the reality to a more hopeful reality that listens to the young now, because the future is their responsibility. I think this is what we need to do now.
Thanks, Huda. And thank you for carrying our voices into those policy rooms, and for joining us for the time that you had available today. So really thank you for that and the work that you're doing. Suli, I want to talk to you next, especially given your background and your history, given the level of violence that we have faced and have witnessed. Where do we start? How do we start to think about where we go from here? What would you say to Israelis or Palestinians who have taken on arms in the last 2 years? How do we wrestle with the difficulties that Huda is pointing to and the challenge of the moment that we're in?
Yeah, one, I have to acknowledge that I don't have the answers. Also, we should also be a bit modest and not really, well, we try to figure out what's the strategy now, right? Um, but like quick ideas, like I'm struggling with, like everyone of you, like having conversations with different people. What's the strategy now um, for the next stage? And what's our mission, our role as activists, as different organizations? One thing I'm really feeling it's really could be really inspiring and necessarily and specifically talking about people that are not in this table, to say. Um, One, we have to humanize the story, in my eyes. So believing that there is no like community or people that born violent and other people born non-violent by nature. It doesn't exist. Let's recognize that without legitimizing violence, obviously, of the state or groups, but humans are able to do that, right? It's not aliens; it's the humans that doing that. That's one thing. And the second thing, as a strategy, I've been talking to some friends also about this. Would love to learn from, you mentioned Mandela in your introduction, Eva. I think we can learn from, we have to learn from other conflict resolutions, other conflict zones and post-conflicts, right? Even though we are not in a post-conflict, but I think the Truth and Reconciliation Committee is really inspiring model for me. I have to say, we don't have to take it like a copy paste because it's a different culture or whatever, but the mindset, the strategy, we can learn from this. Specifically, if we talk about um, people that like carried weapons and arms, right? We have experience in Combatants for Peace like 20 years ago when we started and we start to share our personal stories and doing some accountability work and so on. And all these people has been transformed actually and become peacemakers. So it's fully possible, I have to say. With that said, there is a lot of anger and like, revenge feelings and so many feelings how it has to come. I think talking about the Truth and Reconciliation experience, it brings me to our own local culture. We have something we call it sulha, the reconciliation process. It's a conflict resolution like method that's used in our region for generations and generations, and also so acknowledgement here is really important. I think actually it's not just talking about the far past and the far future, but really about now, recognizing the reality. I think this could be really. Something that we as organizations, activists that have experience of bringing our people together and bridging, we could really help participate and like work on that. We need the political system and the will to support that because honestly, like all these rules or who's the terrorist and who's the violent and who's the bad guy in town and who's the good town, it doesn't allow this work. And these people has to be on the table in my eyes, and I can look at Ireland as example. Also, people that fought, they were on the table, and now some of them are in the parliament or ministers, by the way. And again, I'm not legitimizing any violence of any side, rather the opposite. but there should be accountability. But there we have to bring people that are not in our circles in the last 20 years. That's in my as organizations, of course, if we speak about the bigger picture, we need like to work towards system change that people living in the land can feel the change, they can feel the difference. It's not just talking about peace and love, in the sky, and in the same time, the daily life is full of checkpoints. Like honesty. That's what we experienced Oslo, is different ghettos. Even now, like when you need to travel from West Bank, you have one exit, works for a few hours a day. Just like a simple example, obviously the Israelis has their own needs of safety and security, which is fully recognized. I think in this process of recognition, we can recognize the needs of both sides, which is not in the same place right now due to the power dynamic. But we can start from there, and it's not either or. I think um, we will have a lot of possibilities and different future. That's my eyes right now.
Thanks, Suli. Itai and Rabbi, I wonder if you can comment on that. I mean, one of the things that Suleiman is raising is needing to expand these circles. How do we bring more people and reach more people as part of this? And the plan put forward by President Trump calls specifically in point 18 for an interfaith dialogue process established based on the values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence. How do we bring more people in? What is the work that we can be doing that governments and the politicians can't?
I think that this is something that we didn't do. We didn't go to the places where we have to work with people and talk to people. First of all, it's very difficult today to meet with Palestinians, between Palestinians and Israelis, because I cannot go on Area A. Suli cannot come to Jerusalem. He doesn't have a permit. So there are barriers and walls that are not only physical walls, but also spiritual walls. Our government doesn't want us to meet with Suli or Huda or other Palestinian colleagues. Okay, so I'll give you just an example of how we meet. For example, with Combatants for Peace, every Friday we meet in Bet Jala in Area C, where everyone can mingle. And this is where we are doing our demonstrations. Now, once you meet the Palestinians, and most Israelis have never met a Palestinian, besides the settlers that are harassing the life of the Palestinians. So what we need to do, and I think that Seeds of Peace is doing something like this, is to bring young people, the young generation outside of Israel. But once they come back, nothing happened because they cannot meet. So we have to make pressure on our government, even if we have to transgress the law and meet with our Palestinian colleagues. Because once you don't know the other, you start demonizing him, dehumanize him. You don't know him. So one of the most important things today is to bring people together. I think that during the last 2 years, the Israeli society have changed, not enough, but they have changed. And there is an ongoing struggle on the streets for the democratic face of Israel. I'm not talking even about peace. I'm talking about to reach a situation where there is no violence. Today I was in the West Bank to help the Palestinian farmers to harvest their olives. And there was so much violence from the settlers. The army that didn't do anything in order to protect us. So this is something that we have to expand. More Israelis that will come to the West Bank, more Israelis that will be involved in the reconciliation, or at least to get to know your neighbor. And this is something that don't happen. It used to be during the Oslo Treaty, but then we were talking about hummus, and we were all the same, and we were not dealing with the real issues of the rights of every people to live in dignity, in peace, on the same land. So there is a whole process of education that must be done, but not only talking. We must act. If I may, one more minute, I'll tell you a huge project that I'm involved in with Palestinians and Israelis. There are 58,000 orphans in Gaza right now. And what we're doing, we're creating orphanages, Gaza children villages, in order to give hope to these young children in Gaza who lost their parents, who are mutilated, they're in the midst of a trauma, they're not even in post-trauma, they're in the midst of the trauma. And what we're trying to do is to give these kids a hope that life can be different. And we are a group of Israelis and Palestinians. We have already built 2 orphanages like this, one in Dir el-Balach, the other one in Khan Yunis. Now we're going to build 4 more villages like this, and to teach the kids that there is a different way of living, not only violence, not only Hamas, and not only Jewish supremacy and settlers. Because for me, there's no difference between Hamas and the people of Ben Gvir and Smotrich. It's the same. So I feel that I'm responsible, like Suli is responsible, like Itai, like all the people that are working together to change the reality. And the civil society has a tremendous role in this change. And we saw, at least in Israel, how civil society managed to stop the legal revolution that our government wanted to do. So we can do the same on the conflict.
Itai, I want to thank you, Rabbi. And Itai, I want to bring you in to this too. How do we think about, I think about this all the time. We know that the work works, right? We do a ton of research within Seeds of Peace, for example. The problem isn't that the work doesn't work. The problem is that it needs to be bigger. The problem is that it needs investment. What have you seen, just even in the work that you're doing in Jerusalem? How do we think about where we go from here, and what is required to be able to invest in that, to get to more of a tipping point in the ways that Nava describes?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a question I get often, and it's a question people ask of a lot of peace builders. Peace building has been going on for 20, 30, 40 years in this land, and there's less peace now than ever before. So people say, well, then obviously what you do is a waste of time and a waste of money. And I say, it's not that what we're doing is wrong. It's that we're far too small. There's less than 1% of the population will have, as Nava mentioned, interaction with someone from the West Bank or Gaza. That the amount of people doing this is really the tip of the iceberg. And something I find with my colleagues in Seeds of Peace, Lana and Sumo, that when we go to recruit either Jewish or Palestinian kids, the line we often get is, from the Palestinians, well, I don't want to meet with, IDF soldiers or people that will be involved in, destroying or my home or manning a checkpoint or firing tear gas at me. And then the Israelis, I don't want to meet with terrorists and this sort of thing. And then that view is reflected across the whole of society. And so an argument or a type of thinking I often use is something called suspension of disbelief. And suspension of disbelief is something we all do. So I'll give an example. Like, my daughter loves Harry Potter movies, And when you watch a Harry Potter movie, no one sits there and says, a boy can't fly on a broomstick, a mirror can't talk. It's not possible for someone to live to 900 years old. In order to enjoy the movie, you suspend disbelief that you believe in magic and all of these sorts of things, and then you can enjoy the movie. And that happens in our relationships, in our work. We suspend disbelief every day to do normal human functions, because if we thought lots of things are impossible, then we just wouldn't try anything hard. And so I often say that the first step to peace, and this goes to Harvey's question as well that I saw in the chat, is you need to say, yeah, there's a million arguments why you shouldn't engage in peace building, and they're real and they're genuine, and there's a lot of pain and trauma. But if you want to see a different reality, suspend disbelief. Just come to one of these programs for an hour, come for a day, come for a week, come for a dialogue in all the discomfort that brings you. And once you suspend disbelief once, the next time it's much easier. And then it's easier, even easier the third time. And I think that psychological process of suspending disbelief is something that we need in droves right now, because there's every reason to say, what happened for the past 2 years could start again tomorrow. Because as everyone's mentioned, we've only got a ceasefire. But I think through that process of suspension of disbelief, we can, if we say to ourselves enough, and this is why, Sully, I agree with you, it's important to be hopeful. If we say to enough, well, things can actually get better if we take actions, then it causes people to show up to a protest, to show up to a peace program, to show up to a board meeting, to show up to their workplace, even to show up at their children's school and challenge, a racist poster or a dehumanizing message in a newsletter. There's so many small acts that we can take, and, from little things, big things grow.
Thanks, Itai. I think we'll start to take some of those questions in the chat. So if you haven't yet, please do write your questions there. Please put in your full name and where you're writing from. And the first question that we have is from Moses in Sierra Leone. How can we, and this is a question for me, how can we ensure that peace isn't seen as a Western export, but as a universal value, co-created by all societies, including those too often sidelined in global conversations? And Suleiman, there's an additional question for you here. Is interfaith tolerance enough, or do we need something deeper, like shared activism or spiritual solidarity, to really shift the dial towards peace? These are great questions. Thanks, Moses. I'll say for myself, and then I'm happy to hear your thoughts too, folks. But and Sully pointed to this. Peace isn't a Western export, and I think in some ways it does get a little bit hijacked by what you see in the headlines. But as Sully pointed to, you have sohas, you have loads of traditions that I'm sure the rabbi and Itai would speak to too, from a Judaic perspective, where this is very much embedded within both the spiritual and practical frameworks of these communities. And so, Moses, I couldn't agree with you more. I think we need to lift those up more. I think we need to center that more. I think we need to root that more. And it's partly why I'm really grateful to IMEO for hosting this, so that we can hear from actual people living in the land who are doing this work day in and day out, because that is where this is taking place. Suleiman, I'll repeat the question here for you. Is interfaith tolerance enough? Or do we need something deeper, like shared activism or spiritual solidarity, to really shift the dial?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I also want to strengthen what you said, Eva, and thanks, Musa, I believe his name, for the comment, question, Musa's. Yeah, there is a lot of, I would agree with Musa's actually, beyond the word peace, many of the conflict resolution terms that used in different groups, organizations, actually are coming, it's like Western, whatever, values, right? Terms. Also, that's true. I just really want to agree with this. And that's why for me, it's always important to bring some of the local terms, language. For example, even when we speak about not just the word peace, when we speak about nonviolence, many people think nonviolence is a Western concept, which is totally not true. Historically, it has been embedded in, like you said, David, in our spiritual beliefs, in our faith and faiths. And in our cultures, like even Palestinian culture, the term Sumud is very famous term. That's the name of the flotilla actually was Sumud. That's really coming from even pre this conflict. It was during even the British colonization time and the struggle, and maybe even before. And it's not even about the political part. It's even personal. You know, when there is no rain for 1 year, or you're hungry, or you're not in a good place, like as a strategy, to face traumas and so on, like to be powerful, like the term Sumud is used. My sister named Sumud because we were in jail when she was born, me and my brother. So it's really a lot in our blood somehow. And it's connected to nonviolence, by the way. Some people can explain it differently, but that's how I understand Sumud, to steadfastness and resilience in the land. It's connected to the olive trees, because this is a sacred tree in our tradition, and very grounded in the land. So it's very spiritual. So I totally would say we have to somehow, I don't know the term in English, localize some terms that we use, like the nonviolence communications written by American person. And I have a friend in Lebanon, she translated to Arabic, but she didn't really translate it exactly. She has to use local names and local trees that people will understand. So that's fully, and I believe all the global concepts exist in the local culture. So that's really one big lesson we learned in the last 20 years. And I also don't think there is one strategy that can solve the conflict. It's not enough. Obviously, I fully support different strategies, and I don't think there is one way. Like interfaith is very important, tolerance, and so on. But I think we need more. And that's why I want to put this out there in my eyes with the different groups. I want to really highlight one issue that we have to learn, and we must, which is how to bring different organizations that adopt different strategies in the same table. I'm not talking even about mainstream, the government, the system, and we know the system, we need system change. But first of all, I will look inside to us, people that really in the field, how do we work together despite our differences? So if we talk about tolerance, like before we speak about tolerance in the bigger society, which is very important, obviously, we need tolerance among the different groups that have different strategy, and we have to agree, like somehow, to come to a place where people think differently, different strategy. Maybe we want the same thing, but we have different ways to go there. And this is really, for me, the reason, one of the big reasons that we are not seeing change in the world. There are a lot of organizations out there with good intention, a lot of activists. But yeah, if you don't agree with me, I can't meet with you. This is really this pure list of things. You have to be one, two, three, four. I feel tired of that, honestly, and I really feel this is what must change, like really within the groups, the different groups we work with.
I couldn't agree more, Suleiman. And I think, you know, even if you look historically, you see that it was always people working within systems and outside of systems and reimagining systems, which is really what produced change in the end. And so even as these different strategies exist and hold value, how do we hold that bigger picture and the bigger constellation of organizations, of people who are doing this work and helping to move that needle forward collectively? Okay, great. We've got a question here from Harvey Price, who works for I think is affiliated with the Peace Drums Project, who are working in the West Bank in Israel. Our program is growing beautifully in the West Bank and among the Israeli-Palestinian communities. We're having a hard time recruiting Jewish Israeli families and kids. How do we talk with those families to convince them to send their kids to play music with others? More specifically, Rabbi, how can Peace Drums contribute to the orphanages and bring music to the kids? Music is very healing.
Yes, indeed. This is what we do in the orphanages: art and music, and values as freedom, as dignity, as equality. These are concepts on which we are working in those orphanages, those villages in Gaza. I'm not there; I cannot be there. But look, I strongly believe in education, But it's a long run. If you want to change the way people think, if you want to develop a critical way of thinking, it's a huge investment. And I believe that through education, the transformation can come. The kids now that are in the orphanage and they know what we are doing, they don't hate Israelis. They don't hate Israelis. Maybe tomorrow they will, I don't know. But right now we are working on treating the trauma, giving them a lot of music, a lot of art. There's going to be a huge exhibition of paintings of these kids, how they see the world. They don't see the world as we, the adults, are looking at the world, as dark and no, it's full of hope, full of colors.
Yeah, thanks, Rabbi.
So
Itai,
I don't understand why they cannot recruit Israeli families.
yeah, I wonder, Itai, if you want to comment on that. And I have a thought about it, but as someone who spends a lot of time recruiting in both communities, I'm curious if you have any thoughts here for Harvey.
I think when you recruit someone to something that they don't know, questions I often get on: is it safe? How will I know my child won't be harmed by going to a place? It's across a checkpoint. It's maybe in the eastern part of Jerusalem that I'm not familiar with. So safety is very important. You have to reassure people about safety. They need to trust the staff. So it's very important that the staff from Peace Drums, tell about their stories, about their lives, so people have faith in the staff. The next is the program. Parents and kids have to feel like the program is, in line with their values and what they want to see. And then the last thing is the logistics. And while logistics shouldn't be important, logistics is often very important. When does it happen? What time does it happen? Is there kosher food? Is it happening on Shabbat or during the weekday or in the morning or at night? Those sorts of things. Then you've got the bigger issue of suspension of disbelief, which is what I talk about, which is a big mental block. And then the final thing is people desperately want to do something that they feel like is going to make life better for people here. And people don't come to a program, they come to an idea. And so I would suggest that don't sell Peace Drums as just come together and drum. Sell it as an idea. Sell it as an idea of hope, of a better future, of creating a new reality. You could use it in religious language. There's a lot of musical poetry they could use, but I think people connect to the ideas. And when I look at the movements, in Israel, like so many kids go to youth groups. It's very, very Tuesday. In fact, all schools in this country finish early on Tuesday, so children can go to youth groups. It's really part of the national DNA. And the biggest youth groups, in addition to being fun and well organized, they have very potent ideas that fire people's imaginations, and that's why they come to them and send their children to them for many generations. And I think that's what Peace needs to do. It needs to be not just a program, but a story as well.
Thanks, Itai. Okay, Rabbi, this next question is for you as well. Julie Kalimian from the United States. Julie has a question that I have heard echoed quite a bit. She says, my understanding was that the kibbutzim that were torched during October 7th had Israelis that knew their neighbors on the border. I didn't fully understand your comment that Israelis don't know Palestinians. Didn't the settlers leave Gaza in 2005?
What was the relationship between the kibbutzim and the people in Gaza? The people from Gaza, they were working in the kibbutzim. I mean, there was no equality. They used to go back to their refugee camps, to a miserable life, while the kibbutzim continue to live their life and with ease. They didn't really know the people from Gaza. The people from Gaza didn't really know the relationships were not on a friendly base. It was employee and employer. Okay, it's not the same. So they didn't really know the people from Gaza, and also only a few thousands of Gazawi could enter Israel to work. They didn't meet the youth. They didn't meet women in Gaza. They don't know what are the condition of women in Gaza, the percentage of unemployment. So it's not symmetric. The relationships between the Israelis of the kibbutzim and the people from Gaza were not on an equal base. So they didn't really know them. They were working there.
Thanks, Rabbi. Itai, Suli, anything that you want to add to that? No, okay. I'm seeing a couple of questions from Tasneem in Pakistan and Michael in the US and Shelly Khalid in UK, people asking how can they be involved? What can they do to support the work that's happening on the ground?
Okay. For the 2 last years, what I did is talking to a lot of people in Europe, asking them not to import the conflict into Europe. If you want to help, be pro-peace. Don't be pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli, be pro-peace. Because all the demonstrations are not helping. They're not helping neither the Palestinians or the Israelis. It's not helping us. We are divided enough. So we don't need to be divided even more by Europeans or Americans. If you really want to help, think in a positive way how you can help us. And you can help us in hundreds of ways. There are so many projects, so many programs. Come and be part of them, of these programs. But don't demonize us. Don't demonize the Palestinians. So I really don't know what they can do in order to help. Put pressure on your government. Actually, the Trump administration cut all the subsidies to the human rights and peace-building organizations in Israel and in Palestine. Help us put pressure on your administration.
Suli, Itai, other thoughts on your end? How can the international community help?
I'll say beyond the fundraise, I often think of how would this question sound if it was reversed. Like, let's say I'm sitting here in Jerusalem and I'm seeing horrific things around immigration in the US and ICE rounding up people. So if someone said to me, "What can you do in Jerusalem to prevent, immigration roundups in America?" I'd say, "Well, there's very little. Like, I'm not a US citizen. I can't vote. I can donate money, I guess, to a charity that's protecting migrants, but it's a problem that's on the other side of the world. So, that's a problem for Americans to solve. I have many American friends who are working on that, but it's not something I can do from the other side of the world. And so when I think of that's how that question sort of sounds to me. So obviously the work of building Israeli and Palestinian peace has to be done by Israelis and Palestinians. It's our problem and it's for us to fix it. On the other hand, and let's be realistic, this is the most international conflict in the world. So there are many conflicts that are going on right now. What's happening in Sudan is horrific, in Yemen, in the Congo, but that get, barely, a percentage of the attention that we get. So the fact that we are probably the world's most talked about war, for the last 2 years, for better or for worse, means that we can turn that into an opportunity. In The Holy and the Broken, and also on my website, I write at length about what the international community can do, and I break it down into 3 points. The first is education. I think a lot of the people who talk and write about this place don't understand this place very well, and that's fine. We have a very long and dense history that goes back thousands of years. Maybe Sully should give us a history class, because I think that's very helpful, that people understand what, everything that happened today has its seeds in something that happened yesterday. And so understanding that history is not just an academic exercise, it's vital to understanding the people here. We remember events that happened 1,000 years ago like they happened yesterday. We have very, very long memories here. And I know that's not a kind of Western way of thinking where everything's just connected today to tomorrow. But I think that's very important to understand this place, especially Jerusalem. The next is encounter. Whether you're either in the United States or in India or in Pakistan, every country has its own challenges, and often Israel Palestine, reflects on the foreign policy or even the local politics. I'm looking at now the race for the mayor of New York. There's more questions to the candidates about Israel Palestine there isn't about questions about New York, which I find insane. But it's clear that what's going on here is a domestic issue over there. And so use that as an opportunity to have dialogue with people you disagree with. And in that sense, a lot of the tools we've developed at Seeds of Peace can be readily utilized to work on enabling people to have difficult conversations with people they're not used to. And then the last thing is, I'd say, action. And for some people, that action is a donation. For other people, that action is a protest. For other people, that action is coming here to visit the place and coming on a tour. For some people, that action is just praying for us or sending us love. Everyone will do a different action, but find an action that works for you and then do that.
Suleiman, anything on your end you want to add?
I mean, I agree with that points. Of course, what can you do from outside? There are several points that people can do, I mentioned. Maybe one thing, I think a little bit slightly different, due to the fact, I mentioned, that our cause is a very international, for good and bad, honesty. We can't take the good out of it, we can't just take the benefit out of that. There is a price for this. Being in, the media, the most talked about it and so on, and it become a domestic conflict everywhere, not just in the US, even in other countries. It's really insane. Obviously, I also watched the interview with Mamdani when they asked him and the other candidates, would you visit Israel? This is nothing to do with making New York great again, whatever the slogan. So it does show us how much our story is everywhere. I'm usually careful a little bit about the savior mindset. I don't think so. Let me say this: we Palestinian Israelis, I agree with we have the most responsibility of changing the discourse in our land, or where we belong. In my eyes, and that's the most priority work that we have to do, because end of the story, hopefully, our people has to learn based on the past and the history, not just the trauma. There is also good memories to live together. And I agree that actually for the international community, for people that believe in this holistic approach, it's obviously, usually it's really easy to be with this against that. That's a very simple narrative. But really to show love and care for all the people that live in the land now, which is almost from the river to the sea, you have almost half, almost, no matter what the solutions, what one state, two state, three state, but in principle, I think there is opportunity through these different organizations really to help our people and to promote this work because it's not really known in the mainstream media, right? It's not reported enough because it's not violent, there is no blood, and really it's hard. Like how could we make this work like sexy to say, attractive to young people and to the media and to everybody that people believe that this is not just coming out of weakness. Um, and I hope to see more like, the international community has a lot to do with our story. Like we can't ignore that. That's a truth. That's the fact. Everywhere when we travel, we see that. Um, I'm careful with people that become the king more than the king, whatever you call it in English. Yeah, I hope that people can support what we want in the one living in the land. Yeah, rather than telling us what to do. And that's usually it's like a complex situation because there is also privilege. Like sometimes people, and I say this honesty with my love and respect. I I think a lot of criticism happened against us sometimes from people. Like I'm okay if a Palestinian criticize me. I'm really not okay if someone living in privilege, like in New York, in Berlin, London, criticizing our work, says this is normalization, and that's where it comes too much for me.
Thanks, Suli. And I'll just add to that. And I think this is sometimes a simple and unsatisfactory answer, but as all of you are pointing to, this is something that is very alive in communities in the US, in the UK, and other places. Having those hard conversations with people in your own backyard, in your families, in your neighborhoods, having stretch, having curiosity. I appreciate the questions before. What did it mean when Israel disengaged from Gaza? What was left? Where are our controls? Have that curiosity, have those hard conversations within families. Even though a lot of the work that we do brings communities together, one way that Seeds of Peace evolved over the years was to have a lot of those hard conversations internally within Israeli and Palestinian societies. We also work in other countries. Within societies, we need to be encouraging dialogue and hard conversations to resource that unto itself. And that in itself is a big, it feeds the bigger picture. Okay, I can see questions coming in, so I want to get to a few more here. We have Doris Awad from Jerusalem. Given that the current ceasefire is fragile, how can civil society actors in Israel and Palestine work to ensure that the cycles of war, violence, and dehumanization do not repeat themselves, especially when political will remains absent and trauma is so deeply rooted? How can we shift the role of civil society from merely responding to the consequences of violence to actively preventing its recurrence?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one, Doris. So we haven't really spoken yet about social media on this Zoom, and someone that is both a journalist and I probably also spend far too much time on social media. I regularly follow the most popular Israeli and Palestinian pages on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc. And the level of dehumanization and of hatred that you can see there, and the level of violence that you can see in an hour is horrific. And you think about it, you're seeing it every day. And the people who are most on social media are teenagers. And so it's in most countries in the world, the older you are, the more conservative you are, and the younger you are, the more liberal you are. And Israel Palestine is one of the only places in the world where the younger you are, the more conservative you are on the question of peace, and the older you are, the more liberal you are. And I think that's directly related to how much social media is consumed by young people. So if you're talking about preventing the next war, I would love to see peace organizations invest in social media, because the people who fan the flames of war and violence and dehumanization and mocking Islam, and there's so many accounts that do that, and the programs that like Seeds of Peace, like Combatants for Peace, Rabbis Doctors Without Borders, all of these sorts of programs, their posts get 10, 15, 20 likes, like they never go viral. Because if it bleeds, it leads. So I would love to see a lot more social media campaigns just showing people what peace looks like, I see every day what war looks like. I see every day horrific images of, people without limbs and orphans and bereaved mothers and funerals, and I see so much of it. When do I ever see the alternative on my social media feed? Like, I even follow pages that promote that, and it still doesn't come up. So one is, I think you need to, social media needs to be fixed, and then the next thing is what I call media literacy. Before a person drives a car, they have to take 30, 40 lessons, because we say driving a car is a really dangerous thing, and we don't want to put you behind a wheel until you know how to use it properly, because it's a dangerous thing to have. We give children phones at the age of 12. We don't teach them anything about how to use them. And then we expose them to all this content, and we don't tell them how to work out what's real, what's fake, how to work out if something's from a year ago or from this place or from another place. And I think in the same way we teach English, maths, and science, like, I think a really good way to prevent the next war is to make media literacy a compulsory subject in schools and universities, because we have these phones, which are wonderful tools that can connect us to people over the world. We also need to know how to sort out fact from fiction, and how to work out, what's the headline, what's the story, what's the music, what's this video trying to do to my soul, and so that you can consume it, but consume it in a critical way. And they're at least two things that I feel could challenge dehumanization and would be a really good place to start.
Great. I think I'll also just remind, the folks on this panel have been in this work for decades, some of them. And so I think a lot of this work has been in the works for years and years. And it really is, how do we invest in that at scale? How do we bring as many people in as possible, so that events like these don't happen, and so that societies are prepared to be able to both embrace peace and to be able to sustain it after accords. Okay, we've got a question from Tagreed Al-Khadri in Palestine. Which organizations do you work with in Gaza? Is it a UN or Palestinian organizations?
Both. I mean, we have a local staff from Gaza. They're originally from Gaza. We work with the Red Cross, with UNICEF, and whoever wants to help us heal those 58,000 orphans. So we are working with whoever wants to help us. Everyone is welcome.
I'll say in Seeds of Peace as well, we worked locally in Gaza for many years and had wonderful director there and staff locally on the ground who worked with a network of schools. And so I do think, and you're hearing that echoed, localizing the work to the extent possible is important and a priority.
Yeah.
We have
Also,
Bawani. Go ahead. Yeah.
We're working with the former minister of the Palestinian Authority. She was the Minister of Culture and Youth, and she's the first one who started to create the camps for displaced people during the war. So, I mean, I'm not coming as the savior of Gaza. I feel responsible. I'm not guilty, but I feel responsible for what's going on there. So I'm working with whoever wants to change the reality there, including the Israeli authorities, who are not very nice often.
Thanks, Rabbi. We have a question from Bawani Shankar from Pakistan. From your experience as a peace builder, what mistakes do both sides often repeat after a ceasefire? And I'll expand that maybe to include, what lessons do we have from Oslo, from when there was an actual peace agreement in place?
What not mistakes we done? Yeah, I think there are so many lessons, and there will be so many conversations in the coming days about the lessons of why, of Oslo, and also now with the ceasefire, and how not to let the ceasefire fall again and go back to the conflict management. I think the policy of conflict management has failed. And what needed is really a real solution. And I refer to many comments here. I think one person was referring to Rabinava's like conversation, like she said, okay, Israel withdrew from Gaza, I don't know how many years ago, the settlers left, whatever. There was never really so far a serious solution between Palestinians and Israelis. Let's put this as a fact. They were attempt attempt to make solutions or part one-sided decisions and so on. Even also reminder, Gaza was under 16 years of siege. So if you were born and grew up in Gaza, which is the majority of the people there are young, you basically are living in a big jail. That's really a fact. So I'm just like connecting to this. And I do think we both sides have a lot of responsibility um, to look back and where we did mistakes, especially I think blaming the other side all the time and not take responsibility is like a big thing for me. I think we have the power. Um, each side like has the power really to make this change happen by really looking at like what this is maybe cliche when people say peace start with me. I would say if we change our attitude, it will have impact. It will change, but there will always like suspicious, no trust, obviously, and yeah, and accusation. And even now, the ceasefire. When I look, I have to say, like the quick observation, I don't feel it's from the heart, like faithfully, rather than Hamas accusing Israel of this and that, and then Israel accusing Hamas of this and that. There's a lot of really, it's not coming really from a good intention place. In Arabic, we say there is a very important word called the niyyah, means intention, kavana in Hebrew. I'm sure Rabbi Nava and Itai knows this. It's very important to ask yourself every time you do something why you're doing it. And that's actually important to this whole conversation in my eyes. What do we want to achieve? Where are we going from here? And obviously, the lessons that we learn from the past are very important, not to repeat them. Um, and I think it has to be, this is also connected to the previous question about the response that the different groups responding to the disasters now in Gaza and to the urgent need, obviously very important. But actually, we should also think strategy, not just reaction. I personally prefer really to balance this and really think strategy in a long term than reaction to what's happening every day. And the last thing I wanted to say, if I would be in a decision making place, which I'm not gonna be, because I hate politics and being a politician because you can't be yourself, is really like to have, and this is for me like the main thing, and the rest is details, to have a real historical decision of acknowledgement and recognition of each other, connection to the land. I think for me, this is like the basic thing, really. And from there, like strategies, the practice, it can be really details because this can affect our everything. How do we move towards a real deep solution? That's not gonna be easy. There is no, like, let's say, if we speak about non-military solution, there is no quick solution. And it's gonna be a long journey, and it might be for the next generations, because this is one of the hardest conflicts, right? It's very hard. It's a lot of people think of us or them. It's very hard, and people think also God's hand involved in this. But these are the same words that people spoke about in every other conflict, by the way. Our conflict is unique, it will never be solved, God's hand, and so on. Like there are a lot of similarities here. I really see I see a different future for our people, but I see it, and that's the lesson for me that our freedom, our future, our liberation, and our dignity is very connected. And that's for me the main thing. I don't see a way where Palestinian or Israelis have the freedom and safety alone. It doesn't exist. We are like in Catholic marriage, basically. So we have to find a way to live with each other That's honestly the solution. And I'm not supporting any separation solution rather than bring people together and building bridges based on long history of also living together.
Julie, it's
Absolutely.
wonderful to be married to you. Our peoples share this same land and have the same poetry and so many similar stories. I just want to add one point on what Sully said. I've been thinking a lot about why was there a ceasefire now when, the terms of the ceasefire were more or less identical to what was, put forward by Biden in September of 24. And one of the thoughts that came to my mind is when the White House put out their 20-point plan on October 3rd, they presented it to Netanyahu and he said, yes, but I don't like all of these points, but yes. And then a week later, Hamas responded and said, yes, we will return the hostages, but we don't like all of these points. And most people around the world heard the but. They said, well, Israel doesn't agree to this and Hamas doesn't agree to this. It's not going to be a deal. And the White House decided to, and Trump decided to tweet, there's a deal. Now when the White House tweeted that there was a deal, it wasn't a deal. Because there was a lot more buts than there were yes, if you looked at the responses of Israel and Hamas, but they chose to hear the yes and not to hear the but. And then once they sort of announced that there's a deal and then organized the summit and, the trip to the Middle East and everything, that deal became the reality. And that's what we're living in now with a ceasefire. And I often think that when people have negotiations or have a conversation with someone, it's very easy to say, yes, but I agree with you, but whatever. And then the but often just cancels the yes, because the but says everything I said before the word but, that's not really true. But everything I'm saying after the word but, that's really true. And what I would love to see is us Israelis and Palestinians moving away from yes but conversations and moving towards yes and. And yes and is when you say, yes, I agree that, this is important. And why don't we try this idea? This is the third idea. This is something that hasn't been tried before. So for me, like my yes and I know Nava touched on it in the beginning, for the last 2 years, all of the negotiations between Israel and Hamas haven't involved a single woman. Okay, there's been thousands of hours of negotiations with not one woman in the room. And Rachel Goldberg-Polin, who I actually met today, she spoke at my daughter's school at October 7th Memorial. She wrote a beautiful poem where she imagined what would happen if all of the hostage prisoner negotiations were conducted by women whose sons were hostages in Gaza and Palestinian mothers whose children were hungry and being bombed. And she said, if all the negotiations were being conducted by women, I guarantee you it wouldn't have taken 2 years to arrange a ceasefire. So for me, my yes and for now is that I want to see in all future negotiations at least 50% of the people around the table being women.
We're 50-50.
Yeah, exactly. Like the population. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to start to move us to close here, and I'm going to take a chunk of questions that came in and ask you to masterfully weave this into some final reflections for us. And there's sort of two camps of questions that I'm seeing. One is, what needs to happen within societies in order to actually realize meaningful steps? And I'm seeing questions about what has to happen within Palestinian societies. What are the conversations and the steps that need to take place? What needs to happen within Israeli society? And there's a question, especially as you start to see more of a rightward turn. And then there's a question in here about how do we connect these dots better? So as we do this work internally within societies, how do we also ensure that we are building towards collective impact, that it's not all of us working in silos in the field and being able to do that? Where are there opportunities for us to be greater than the sum of our parts? So I will welcome final thoughts on that and anything you want to leave us with. And I am so grateful to the group that's come on. It's amazing to see questions from Nigeria, from Egypt, from Jordan, from Pakistan, around the world that have gathered for this. Itai, why don't we start with you? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, there was a lot of work there. I'll tell a story of our cooperation. This is a micro story, but so a couple of years ago, an organization called Bait of Hope approached us at Kids for Peace, and we couldn't afford a summer camp at the time. And they said, we'll give you a summer camp if you hold it with another organization. So we approached several organizations in Jerusalem and said, who wants to do a joint summer camp? And a group called the Jerusalem Youth Chorus who's also have Israeli and Palestinian kids singing music together. They said, look, we're looking to do a summer camp, but we've never done dialogue before. And then we said, look, we've never done music before. And so we came up with a program where every day there was 2 hours of singing, there was 2 hours of dialogue, and then 2 hours of sort of other social activities that you do on a camp. And it was really weird because they weren't used to our style of dialogue, and we weren't used to, putting together in a chorus and doing harmonies and learning instruments. And through that thing, a lot of friendship formed, and then kids tried out visiting the other organization. And even though it felt like both of us weren't doing our mission actually, both of these organizations, is to find opportunities for Israeli and Palestinian kids to meet and work and learn together. And it was a wonderful experience. And we only did it because we wanted to get this grant, but it actually made for a really nice camp. And I'd love to see something like that on a national scale. Like every country has a Ministry of Defense. I don't know a single country that has a Ministry of Peace. Imagine that every country in the Middle East had a Ministry of Peace, and they had budgets and allocations, and could build buildings, and they were devoted to peace education, and then they coordinate curriculums together. At the moment, that comes from civil society because governments aren't interested in that. But I think there's a lot of cooperation. I personally go to a lot of meetings held by AllMep almost once a month, and I speak to people from a dozen different organizations. Some work in tech, some work with youth, some are women's organizations, some are church-based organizations, and everyone has their own challenges. But they share, oh, we watched this film, we had this guest speaker. So I'm always trying to learn from other organizations. I really don't feel like, like law firms are always competing for clients. We're not competing for clients. We're all on the same team, all of these different peace organizations. And I think the more we can cooperate, the better it is for everyone.
Itai. Rabbi?
The problem is that most organizations are competing each other. And the block of peace, the block of organizations are not united. And that's why we keep failing. And when you look on the right side of the political map, you see that they have a goal, they know what they want, they don't ask questions, and they manage to hijack the conscience of the people, the government. I think we should learn how to work as a cooperation, as a coalition of organizations. And I'm sorry to say, the majority of the organizations are directed by men and not by women. And the ego is going up and up, and they don't know how to collaborate and how to create something that is powerful on the ground. So this is maybe something that we should try to do, is to create a huge consortium of organizations led by women and not men, and you will see the change.
Amen. Ken Yiratzon. Yeah.
Well, Rabbi, somebody said once upon a time, if there will be peace between genders, the world will know peace. So I'm not sure if women lead and the men will be oppressed is the solution. We need collective liberation, in my eyes, for the oppressed and the oppressor. I don't really use these terms lightly, but for the sake of the conversation. And I do agree that necessary how much important to work in coalition and partnerships. That's for sure. Like it's really a conditional. And I think people that think really big and we have to really push harder for cooperation among the different groups with different strategy, because otherwise nothing will change. I think there is not enough cooperation, but there is some, like I mentioned all MAB and a few other coalitions. It's not enough, obviously.
Yeah, but
Um, and yeah, of course, it's not enough. Um, and yeah, so maybe now is since we are like in historical time, we have really to take time a bit among the emergencies, but to reflect of the different leaders and the different groups that are in the field, actually, how to really bring people together from the same field, basically. And I also will take the word of Itai. I really like it. You know, it's a lot start when we say yes before we say but, because we immediately jump into but because of the traumas and so many things and the way how we think. But actually, just by saying yes and opening our heart, actually, a lot can change in the coming future. And yeah, the intention is really, and the invitation is really to choose life. Yeah, and that's what would draw. Yeah, I believe in life and the value of life, and I believe that will win actually, and that majority of people and majority of the people want a good life at the end of the day, right? And free and liberation and freedom, basically. And there is no force that can stop that. It's just as simple as that for all of us, where all of us can practice our identities also in peaceful and colorful way. And I grew up around Jerusalem, where I live now, but I can't access to Jerusalem now, obviously, because I'm Palestinian with Palestinian papers, but that's where my family from. I hope we are in a moment where people can also let it go of some old like thinking. Yeah.
Thanks,
To
Suleiman.
allow life, basically. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, thanks to each of you for sharing and for sharing so honestly and so thoughtfully. I'll say, you know, this ceasefire really, it feels like a window, however narrow it is, for this to be a real inflection point, not a return to life as it was on October 6th, but an actual meaningful turning point here. And whether this window continues to open or starts to close will in some way be dependent on what people decide to do here, not just politicians. And so again, I thank everyone for joining us. May this be a moment that we begin to protect this together and really invest in it together. So thank you for that. And thanks to IMEO for bringing us into the conversation.
Thank you.
A big thank you to Eva and to all our panelists for sharing their insights today. I think we all needed that dose of hope and optimism, and inshallah, women will be sitting at the table moving forward. To the audience, if you have any ideas on what can be done on the ground to sustain the ceasefire and eventually peace between Israelis and Palestinians, please email info@middleeastoptions.org. Let's all start removing the words yes, but from the conversation. Before we sign off, please take a look at the links on your screen. You can find details on upcoming IMEO webinars and our monthly podcast, The MENA Mix, available on YouTube and Spotify. Thank you all for tuning in today, and see you soon, inshallah.